Chapter 43 is on administrative law. If you're running a business, you will very much so run into any state or federal government's administrative regulations. They're there to, again, protect society from chaos. These are the fingers and the hands, the feet of the lawmaker. So those three branches of government, either in Olympia, that's our state, with the judicial, executive, and legislature, or the three branches in Washington, D.C. with our federal government. Those two governments have their own hands and feet. Those are the administrators that carry forward, typically through the executive offices, that's the governor here or the president there, the functions of the day-to-day operations. So as you think about administrative law, think about how this thing the government basically meets you. Most people understand administrative law because they're working with it more frequently than they are the three branches which are removed from us, such as Olympia and DC. So we'll start with an overview. The great thing about this area, and this is again another gap between that and the last chapter, is that there's a lot of uniformity, both in federal government and in state government. The administrative agencies carry out a kind of quasi-government approach. Most agencies have an ability to set their own rules so that there is their own procedures to follow. That way they can basically control the chaos. That looks like a legislative branch. They can also adjudicate in some cases. For instance, if you were to file for an unemployment claim and the employer disputed it, saying that you left voluntarily, that matter could go through an unemployment agency hearing, so the administration would act like a court. The last one would be the enforcement, which is why these agencies exist. They can carry forward what they find to be true. They can basically fine, they can penalize, they can order, they can. So those are the enforcement sides of whatever they've been tasked by the government itself, the three branches, the legislature primarily. So as these administrative agencies function chiefly as executive officers, they also have other functions such as rulemaking, like a legislator, and decision-making, like a court. So in essence, you could say that they have all three functions of government in a very, very limited capacity, however. And they are subject to appeal, so that the administrative agency decisions are not final. You can always appeal them with limits. But the good side is that as well, if you see the federal government acting, you see the state government acting, they're acting typically under a sort of unified body of law called the Administrative Procedures Act. And it's a federal law, but it's also been duplicated in state law. So I'm going to skip over a few of the sort of how these agencies work and the nature of them. But, and the slide, I think, the slides here I think are quite good. Frankly, as far as clarity and what you need to understand. But the nature is of working with these agencies is that the procedures from the beginning to the appeal, the decision is pretty much the same from state to state and from state to federal government. So working with one agency teaches you 90%, 80% of what it would be like working with another agency. So if you're an employer in construction, you're working with workers' compensation insurance, the commission, the hearings officers, everybody, maybe they have a different name from state to state, but they all function in a certain way. They're going to proceed by doing whatever the law does. And again, the mother of the law here is the Administrative Procedures Act. It's a federal law, but it sets a standard as far as how many days you have this or how many rights you have there to proceed. It's like you would say, as I go through court, I proceed. Well, as I go through an administrative agency, how do I proceed? Fortunately, these agencies have copied each other's procedures, and so now we have a very typically solid procedural right, as we see from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So that's really all we need to say. The rest of this is definitions. You know, when you are a business and you're regulated because of perhaps the industry you're in is highly regulated, perhaps because of the dangers involved, or perhaps because of the trade involved, you'll begin, for example, trucking industry is highly regulated. You'll find that there's going to be, in the administrative side, a lot of help, a lot of information you can get from the government agencies, the administrative agencies, as well as the industry itself. Much of if you're in a highly regulated area, much of your day-to-day function is going to be dealing with the regulations.